I'd like to welcome everyone to Ohio Information Security Forum's anniversary meeting. This is something we do once a year, usually the second or third Saturday in July. During today's presentations, we may or may not be filming different presentations. So just remember, while we're filming presentations, we're also recording audio. That's to use for future prosecution. So it's important to remember that you don't want to say anything that you don't want recorded. So just be aware of that. So stay on that side of the camera and don't say anything, and you can pretty much throw anything you want at the speakers. So Ohio Information Security Forum, helping to secure our digital world. We've been around for 5 years. We started in 2006. We were founded by 3 guys with $60 each in their pocket. That's how we started this group. We rented some rooms for 3 months out at Wright State. I shook down my corporate management to let me expense out some food for the meetings, and voila, Ohio Information Security Forum starts. The whole goal of this organization is free information security education, where we wanted to focus on technical security topics. We have the ISSA out there, which focuses on management level security topics. We have InfraGard that goes into some other area I'm not quite sure what you would call, but our goal was to focus on technical security topics, kind of where the rubber meets the road. So that's why we were actually founded. It's free to attend. I know everyone here registered. You donated $10. And we thank you very much for that donation. But technically it's free. If you couldn't afford that $10, we would have gave it back to you. That's what it's all about. Too late, you're not getting your money back now. Free food and drinks. Our very first meeting, we had 15 people. It happened to be just friends we managed to drag together, and that's how we started. So we meet once a month, the second Thursday of each month is when we meet. And we meet down here at the Sinclair Learning Center into the hall here. And we also have food there, so we have food and drinks there. And the way we survive is through donations and corporate sponsorship. So we're definitely open to everyone giving us money, because that's the only way we can survive. We're also looking for corporate sponsorship. So if you're interested in going to your company and saying, hey, would you like to sponsor this group? That it's free education. We get a chance to get continuing education points for our certifications and all those type of things. Because if we don't get money, we'll eventually close down, because you can only go for so long running it out of your pocket. Probably the first 6 months to a year, that's basically how we ran the thing. I got my company to pay the money, and all of us would chip in a little bit of money to pay for the room every month. So what's our purpose? We network with our peers, conduct training, share knowledge, and collaborate and learn. Focus on security issues, emerging threats, hacking techniques, current trends, defense policies, best practices, technical strategies, laws and regulations. And we have yet to actually do anything on law and regulations. I'm going to have to take that out of the slides. It'd be nice to get somebody in, but it's hard to find somebody that can actually tie legal stuff into technical stuff. So it makes it very difficult. So basically, we're willing to talk about anything dealing with information security. I don't care what it is. Only requirement is that it is legal and it's been ethically disclosed with a vendor. So we've actually had demonstrations on live vulnerabilities and exploits the day that they were released or published by the vendor. So we've done some really cutting edge stuff. We've done reverse engineering. We've done malware analysis. We've done everything from router setup and configurations to risk management and how that affects the guy in the workforce. The guy where the rubber meets the road. So we cover a bit of everything. So that's what this group is all about. Sponsors, like I said, that's what drives us. The actual bagels and coffee this morning was sponsored by CDW. I forgot to do a little printout stick on the wall. It's sponsored by CDW. They'll probably kick me in the ass for that. But telling everyone now, CDW is the one that paid for all that, and that's how we survive. So some of our sponsors, one of our big sponsors is Booz Allen, who are in this building here also. They're critical to keeping us running. Nexum, they are also a gold sponsor, and they've been with us the first year. We were struggling for money after 6 months, a year or so. They came along and they saved us, and they've been with us ever since. CDW Corporation continues to help sponsor, slightly under the table, but they still sponsor us. ACS has been a key sponsor, kind of like the same way. In the same way with New Horizons, a local education computer learning center. They've also been a sponsor with us for 2 years running now. Also, if we look on the back of the badges, I don't have one. There's a business card back there for a company, a local Mac place. So I suggest you go out there and check out their business, see what they have out there. They also help sponsors. They help pay for a big part of the badges that we're wearing, which are always kind of like cool. I always like doing this every year. It's kind of fun. I made a mistake last year. I ordered badges last year, and I got the year put on them. So if anyone wants an extra 50 lanyards, because it's no longer 2010, so they're like not very usable, so I had to order new ones. So I won't make that mistake again.
Just need white out.
There you go, man. I get one of those white, you ever seen those white pens? That's what I do, just cross it out and put 2011. Now I've got 2012 next year. So if we don't raise money next year, your lanyards are going to be like that. You'll see that 2010 crossed out and something written in with a magic marker. So we also have a disclaimer, which I'm going to read to you. This is very important. This material presented here exclusively reflects opinions of authors and does not express opinions and positions of Ohio Information Security Forum, the Board of Directors, and sponsors. The materials for educational purposes only, and Ohio Information Security and the Board of Directors and sponsors are not responsible for its use or misuse. No warranty or guarantees are applied or otherwise in effect. Use of these tools, techniques, or technologies are at your own risk. So when you come to our group, you're going to learn a lot of cool things. You can learn a lot of nasty, vicious things. The very important thing to remember is be responsible with that knowledge that you walk out of here with. Do not try to blame our group for your incompetence. So when your company fires you because you DOS the entire data center, don't say, Ohio Information Security Forum taught me how to do that. Because, you can't squeeze blood from a turnip, and our entire bank account is not going to save your ass. So today's agenda. Oh gosh, I can hardly see that. Put blue up there. So we're actually going to start with Kurt Roemer here in just about 5-10 minutes or so. I don't know if everyone's seen it online, but we have one track, so it's fairly easy. If you're in this room, you'll get to see the presentations. We're going to have about a 15-minute break between each presentation for the next presenter to set up, for you to go to the bathroom, or to grab some food. Approximately 12:30 time frame, we're going to have pizza. I ordered pizza from Donato's. Dave's going to run out and pick that stuff up, and so we'll bring that in. We have a whole lot of pizza, so it'll be kind of fun. So at least, don't take off early today. Stay around, eat some pizza with us, shoot the bull, interact with your peers. You get to learn some neat stuff that way. And then we finish up about 4 o'clock, and then we do a prize drawing. So you were given a little red ticket. Everyone got a little red ticket? Hopefully everyone got a little red ticket. So we have a prize drawing. We kind of do this every year. So we have some cool prizes. We always have some fun stuff. I think there's a little bit of everything back here. So what it was going to do is we figured if everyone showed up and asked for their money back today out there, there wasn't going to be a prize drawing. I was going to take it all back to the store tomorrow. But you guys are nice enough to let us keep the donations, which is cool. So we'll have some cool prize drawing. There's actually a printer here, and it's sealed, so you don't have to worry about me putting any malware on it. So you should be fine.
Right.
Everything I give you should be sealed up for your protection. That way you can be sure that we didn't put anything on it that we shouldn't have put on it.
Have you done any research on removing seals and so forth?
I'm just too lazy for that stuff, man. I got all your PayPal accounts. No, joking. So yeah, as an example of some of the stuff that we typically do, here about a month ago we did a demonstration or a presentation on PayPal, where we showed how, because of the messaging, you know how you can send somebody a message in PayPal, a vulnerability of cross-site scripting that could be used to steal their account information. That's all been fixed, but we actually demoed that live, or not live, but we had a video of that. So that's some of the cool stuff you get to learn about, some of the risks and vulnerabilities that exist out there in our group. So we encourage you to show up every month. And I'll go ahead and let's, if you have any questions or suggestions, info@highinfosec.org. I encourage you to show up at every one of our monthly meetings. Like I said, we have a ball. It's always fun. And I'll go ahead and get Kurt up here so he can hook up his stuff. And I do a quick intro. Kurt Roemer, good friend of mine. Known him for what, about 7 years now, Kurt? 8 years?
About 8.
7 or 8 years. Kurt is the Chief Security Strategist for Citrix Systems, leading security, compliancy, risk, privacy, strategy efforts for Citrix products. As a member of the Citrix CTO office, he set the technical direction for cybersecurity innovation. Roemer's 20-plus year information service veteran, certified information security professional, member of the PCI Security Standard Board of Advisors, and a commissioner of the U.S. Public Sector Cloud 2 Initiative. Roemer participated in security standard development and regularly appears at security issues experts online, print, broadcast, media, CNN. He was on CNN. It was like totally cool. Had to check that out. Why is Kurt here?
Not in handcuffs either, which,
So why would Kurt show up here? I think he thinks I have pictures. Okay, so he's really quick. Say, sure, Daryl, I'll come on down. No, Kurt actually, on his own ticket, drove in from Chicago to present at our group here. So everyone, just give Kurt a hand.
Yeah, thanks, Daryl, and good morning, everyone. As Daryl said, I'm Kurt Roemer, here not representing Citrix. We can talk about some stuff later, but definitely here to help increase education, increase some information sharing. I'm deeply committed to making sure that the information security community continues to learn and grow and bond together. It's not about us going to websites and reading up on things. It's about us interacting and about us definitely sharing information that helps all of us get better, helps us understand the problem, but more importantly, helps us find some really cool and innovative solutions. That's what this is all about. And I could say presentation, but I don't want this to be a presentation. I want this to be a discussion. I want this to be something where we're open, we're sharing, we're talking, we're getting questions during all of this. I've just got a few slides to maybe frame some things out, but really want to have a good discussion around endpoint security. When you take a look at endpoint security these days, how many people know somebody who's got one of those computers? It's audience participation day. Yeah, I mean, we've all seen it. We all continue to live with it. We, fight these battles all the time. And just as a couple other questions here. First of all, how many attackers do we have in the audience? Remember, the camera's not on you. You can raise your hand. All right, we have a couple. How many defenders? All right, yeah. Good. Well, we're going to spend a little time talking about both because you need to understand both sides of the equation to really know what's going on. And sometimes the attackers don't even know that they're the attackers. They don't even know they're causing risk to the organization. And that's something else we'll spend a little bit of time on. So, we'll go through and just kind of level set on where everything's at, what problems we're facing, why we're in this situation, and kind of how we can move forward and what we can do. So with that in mind, one of the things that you always step back and look at is, where have we been? What have we done? Why have we gotten to where we are today? Well, when you take a look at it, if you want to think last century, last decade, here's how a 90s IT director ran the shop. I'll give you this laptop. and you'll like it, right? Here's this 5-year-old Dell, HP, IBM, whatever. Probably, re-imaged. We've got the standard corporate image. It's yours, and here it is. Maybe you get admin rights, maybe you don't get admin rights, but I'll figure this all out. Secondly, and how many people believe this one? All problems can be solved in the network. All right? Well, that's what we thought last decade, right? Wasn't it? And unfortunately, there's still a lot of companies that still believe that. But don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the network isn't critically important to security, because it is. It is extremely critically important to security. But it's not the only thing. It's only the piece in the middle. How many organizations do you think are still spending on all kinds of network security things that are completely ineffective these days? Yeah, I see a lot of hands. That's really something you have to take a look at. Your end users don't care about your network. They're going to pick up whatever device they happen to be infatuated with that day. They're going to connect up to whatever wireless is out there, and they're not going to think twice about it. So all that money that you're spending to have this nice, pristine, secure network, what's it really doing for you? You got to think about that. There are places where that makes a lot of sense, but it's not the be-all, end-all. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of people that need to understand that. And then same thing with applications. The application environments have been extremely restrictive. We'll give you this security suite. We'll give you this Office suite. We'll give you these enterprise resource applications. And that's what you get. Deal with it. Work with it. Figure out how to make things happen. Not necessarily a good situation, huh? What about if somebody's traveling and they're a road warrior, they're always out there? How do you let them install their own email app so that they don't have to carry around 3 laptops? How do you let them maybe do Facebook or LinkedIn if you're into that kind of stuff? Do you let people do that or not? Well, years ago, stuff was locked down. Unfortunately, this is still how some folks think. And so it brings up some kind of irrational fears. People are bringing in their own devices. I will tell you, if you work in IT, and particularly in IT security, and this is the thing that you're most afraid of, you got some problems these days. You wouldn't believe the number of people who called me when the iPad first came out and said, Kurt, our executives are bringing these in. Tell me how I can keep this off the network. There's no way I can let this in. Wow. Okay, really? And you can tell them some ways to do that, but is that really the right answer? So why do people keep these things off the network?
They can't control it.
They can't control it. Should they be able to control it?
Well, in their mind.
In their mind? Yeah. Other opinions? Why do people want to keep these off the network?
Fear.
Fear, yeah. Is it a rational fear?
Yeah.
Yeah, could be. It's kind of funny. I parallel this to going through the airport and through the TSA and stuff like that. So, I'm going through and they run me through the body scanner and I've got my boarding pass here in my pocket. And the guy's like all freaked out. Oh my God, you've got a piece of paper. And I'm going, okay. And I hold it up in my hands, because they're like, hold it up. He goes, no, you can't do that. You can't have this paper in here. And I'm thinking, wow, if a single piece of paper can compromise all of airport security, wow, now I'm really scared. But, IT thinks the same thing about these. If a single iPad can compromise the security of your entire network and your entire operation, you got a bigger problem than this iPad. Secondly, there's the network issue. We talked about this already. People are bringing their own networks. They're connecting up to anything. We should allow for that. It's reality. But we shouldn't blindly allow for that either. You pick up some of these devices, they've got wireless, they've got wired, they've got Bluetooth, they've got 3G, 4G. You've got so many different input and output points into these devices these days. You've got apps that set up their own application-specific VPNs. Connectivity is a lot different than it was in the 90s. And then you get the people who are completely freaked out about the cloud. Cloud's bad. I guess we're going to hear about that this afternoon. I might have a couple things to add to that presentation. That'll be fun. And then micro apps, people going out buying their own applications, doing all kinds of stuff on these things. IT is completely freaked out about that. So what does it really mean? What's in it for IT? Well, I would say if IT is completely freaked out about this, there's continue to tell everybody no, what's going to happen to IT? Yeah, bye-bye. They're getting pushed off to the side. They're getting marginalized. And you hear a lot of the analysts and industry pundits say, IT should die. IT should go away. It's become completely ineffective, and it's not a practice that we should have anymore, particularly information security. Well, no, that's not true. But we have to change. We went from this IT owned everything, tried to run everything, tried to tell you what technology you bought, what you did, what you didn't do, and they weren't real appropriate to the business at some points in time, but hey, they did what they did with the tools they had at the time. Then we went into this whole free love, users get to do everything, go out, buy their own services, everything's just great, everything's running rampant. And all of a sudden we're seeing WikiLeaks, we're seeing all these attacks against major companies, one of which I read about as I'm driving by here, and all kinds of other stuff. So, we obviously have to do some things differently. But one other thing that we have to do differently is we have to think about how we're going to support the business, and more importantly, how we're going to support people. This isn't about the technology anyway. And one thing I would beg each of you to take back to your organization is take your department that says information technology and relabel it. Make it something else. Make it information services. Bring it back to what it was when we were actually delivering valuable and essential services to the business. It's not about the technology anymore. You're not buying the technology. You're not choosing the technology. Your users are buying whatever they want. They're choosing the technologies. So don't make it about tech. Make it about services. Make it about cool things you can do for the business to help them innovate. With that said, let's get into the endpoint piece of this and what we can do. When you look at bringing power to the people, a lot of it starts with the endpoint, because let's face it, that's what they care about in a lot of ways. Well, I'm not saying this whole endpoint thing isn't without risk, though, and without problems, because there are definitely some issues here. Security, of course, is a chain. And it's maybe even more than a chain these days, because you can't clearly articulate it end to end anymore. It's more like a web. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of trust factors. When you've got somebody who can go out and grab their device, they take a picture, that picture's geotagged, that picture's automatically transmitted up to Flickr, that picture's automatically sent out through Twitter and Facebook and everything else. It's not a real little clean chain of what's going on. Security is the same way. You've got all these interactions, all this collaboration. We have to kind of redesign with that in mind and know that it's more than the chain. But the endpoint factors into that chain big time. I mean, if I've got data on this that is critical to the organization or something that's really sensitive, and I just kind of leave this thing laying behind and somebody grabs it later, I lose it in a cab or whatever, we've got a breach event. We've got some major issues. So you can't just let people walk around with really sensitive info. But then, you get into the whole argument of, is this really an enterprise device? I know a lot of CEOs and CSOs and CFOs and everybody else like to walk around with these with all kinds of sensitive data on it, but should they? Is this an enterprise device? Yes or no? No? A couple people shaking their head no. We'll talk about that in a second. And then there's the other fallacy of virtualization solves all problems. Yeah, okay. I happen to work for one of those vendors. I can tell you that is not our stance. Virtualization is one way to solve some of the problems, but virtualization does not solve all problems. Just because you took the same crappy Windows desktop with everything that you had and munged it together and shoved it out in a data center somewhere and now you're connecting up to it, doesn't mean you fixed everything. So we'll talk about how to fix some of those things, but don't let people get away with this because it can cause some real issues. And then, we already had the question of unmanaged endpoints. So this is mine. I paid for this. I bought this myself. I use this at the company. Should the company be able to manage this? Yes or no? Yes?
Does it contain company data?
Ah, good question. Do they need to know that? Really? They need to know that? Okay.
Well, it should be assumed.
Should be assumed.
If you have remote access, the odds are you're going to have company data.
Oh, that's a good one. It should be assumed that if you have remote access, that you have company data on it. I like that. I like that a lot. I'm going to disagree with that. I'm going to help you disagree with that as well. But you know what? That's unfortunately the default position. When you take a look at most companies that have gone out and allowed people to bring in their devices, what did they do? I remember when these came out, iPhone. No, I'm not a complete Apple junkie, but I just happen to have a few with me today. When these came out, I remember most organizations were in process of having two-factor authentication in front of everything. All of their remote access, all of their email, all of everything, right? How many organizations, when the iPhone came out, turned off their two-factor authentication so that people could get in and put their company email on these devices? Anybody know an organization that did that? There were literally hundreds of thousands. Pretty much every company I knew turned that capability off so that somebody could just download their email to this device. Okay, so then you got a little problem. Now you've got sensitive data, and by the way, for most of us, the most sensitive data that you receive comes in through email. Yeah. So now you've got sensitive data on a personally owned device with maybe a PIN protecting it. Ooh, that's tough. Nice 4-digit PIN. So once again, camera's not on you guys. How many of your PINs start with 19? 3%. Yeah. Maybe not people in this room, but others. You can pick up one of these devices and take a look at the smudge pattern on here, and you will see the 1 and the 9 are pretty much used for the PIN every time. Why? Because people choose dates for their garage codes, for their phones, for everything else. So you can look, and because Apple doesn't move the little box to put in your PIN code, that 1 and the 9 are always in the same spot. You got a pretty good chance of being able to pick what the PIN is from there. Just go out to LinkedIn or Facebook and see what interesting dates are associated with that person or some of their relationships, and bingo, you're in, right? Little things to think about. So maybe you're protected with a PIN, maybe you're not, but if there's sensitive company data on this device and the company doesn't own this and the company doesn't manage this, wow, we got some big problems. So what did most companies try to do? They said, oh, we're going to use ActiveSync, or we're going to use mobile device management, and we're going to wipe your device whenever there's a problem. Don't worry, you just call us, let us know you lost your phone, and we can wipe it. How well does that work? Okay, so from an end user perspective, what does it mean when they wipe your device?
It's history.
It's history. What's on your device that you care about?
Pictures.
Yeah, your pictures, your email, your apps, your settings. It's all your stuff, right? So the company wipes it and it's all gone, right? It was that easy for maybe a couple people. Most of the attackers who find these phones know that there's the ability to wipe these, so they just wrap them in aluminum foil, pop the SIM card out, turn it off, whatever, and can it be wiped? No. And, you lose a device, the company wipes it, maybe, you get fired, you leave the company, and they're going, well, yeah, we wiped it, everything's gone. Really? You ever hear of backups? Every time you plug this thing in, right, it's backing up all of that sensitive company data to what? Your computer, your network, your backup system. Of course, everybody's all got that encrypted at home, right? Yeah. So as you can see, we got a little bit of a problem here. And a big part of it is because of this driving force called consumerization. Consumers have bought their own devices. They're making their own choices. They're the ones doing this. So consumers are the bad guys, right? No, of course not. What's happened is IT, in their blind focus on technology within the company, has missed the boat in terms of what's really going on out there. And so what we need to do is help IT get some control around the things that matter. Let's take a little poll. How many people think IT should manage these devices? And got a couple. You sure about that? All right. We talked about this earlier, but we had a couple new people join in. So you really want the IT department to take control over a device that you bought.
Do you want to connect it to my network? The answer is yes.
Okay.
No way.
No way. All right, yeah, so good. We're going to get some polarizing opinions here. I like that. Keep that in mind as we go through here, and then let's talk about some ways that we can satisfy both of you. Let's first talk about some of the risks, though. When you take a look at risks, risk used to be something that was pretty easy to figure out. It was mainly pretty static. You could go in, you could do this big threat modeling and risk analysis, and you knew what the risk was to that beautiful little HP or Dell machine that you had in the office or carried around with you. IT kind of understood the risks. Well, with these things being updated every time you connect in, patches coming out all the time, new apps, new ways to interact, does IT really get the risk to this anymore? And the risks are evolving so rapidly, and the threat landscape is evolving so rapidly on mobile, we can't use a lot of the traditional techniques to go after this. But we first have to recognize, hey, we have a little problem here. And then from the mobile device perspective, the risks that I look at are something that I call true risks. So you look at tampering. If somebody were to pick up this device, what could they do to tamper with the data that's on it? What could they do to maybe inject malware, put on a keystroke logger, be able to get in and change critical elements of a spreadsheet, wipe out your certificates, wipe out your URLs for connectivity? How can they really mess with things and screw things up, either intentionally or unintentionally? Another big issue is residual data. Several of these devices, when you go and delete something, it's not gone. It's just, you remove the pointers and the data is still there. So you're going through and doing backups, and that data is still being backed up. It's still somewhere on this device, so it's out in the backups. And it's pretty straightforward for somebody doing forensics to go through and grab that, right? You really need to think about what's left behind. And to cut to the chase, the best way to fix this is to not have that data hit this device in the first place. Another huge big risk is unavailability. And the unavailability is either the data just plain not being there, not being accessible, but it's also degraded access. How many times have you gone and said, I'm going to work on something at home, or I'm traveling and I really need to get in from the airport, and you can't get onto the wireless? You can't authenticate. It's asking you for $25 for an hour so that you can get on somebody's wireless, and you're like, screw that, right? That's a big problem. We've got to make this a lot easier. We've got to make sure the data is available, but we also need to make sure that users can see when the data is not available, when it's not being updated. When you're on a laptop and you're connecting in and you're looking at real-time data, maybe you're in the security operations center, or you're looking at a stock feed, or you're looking at something critical that has to be there in real time, usually on laptops there's enough indicators and visibility to let you know when you're missing something, right? On these mobile devices, that's not always true. So the data that you're looking at might not be fresh. And you can be making decisions on stuff that's hours or even days old. And that's part of the availability issue as well. And then, of course, everyone's personal favorite, exfiltration. How can somebody steal from these devices? What's your favorite way? How do you steal from a mobile phone?
I don't know, maybe get Cydia or something else and then code something manually to extract it.
Yeah, Cydia. Everybody's familiar with Cydia? You can do jailbreaking and then install Cydia and basically be able to take over control of the iPhone in ways Steve Jobs would definitely not want you to do. Kind of interesting this last week, though, there's been some vulnerabilities associated with iOS and particularly the iPhone where they were able to jailbreak the iPad 2 because of a PDF vulnerability. So the iPad 2 previously, ever since it came out, could not be jailbroken. Everybody's tried and nobody's been able to do it. Somebody discovered a PDF vulnerability. I mean, I thought PDFs were, pretty benign, right? Supposed to be. And because of that, they were able to jailbreak iOS and do a jailbreak for the iPad 2. Using Cydia, though, get this is really interesting. Using Cydia, once you jailbroke it, you could actually go in and apply the patch that fixed the vulnerability so that your iPad 2 is no longer vulnerable to getting a malicious PDF and being able to be exploited. About a week later, I saw this just yesterday, Apple released the patch for the rest of us to be able to apply if you weren't jailbroken. So your jailbroken device could have actually been, quote unquote, more secure than the non-jailbroken device. Pretty amazing, isn't it? We live in interesting times. But these are some things to definitely think about. As people are walking around with all of these devices, and you've got patches and updates and controls and apps that the organization doesn't own, how are these being maintained? How else can people exfiltrate data and pull stuff off of this? So, other good ways of exfiltration? Who else wants to add in on that one?
You can just remove the SIM card itself, take that with you, does that contain the data?
Remove the SIM card itself, take it with, does that contain the data? Not on all mobile devices. A lot of times they're either keyed to the SIM card, so that's part of the encryption scheme, or SIM card plus PIN. You've got your EIN that's associated with that. But that brings in some problems because what they do first and foremost is they concentrate on the availability from the carrier side. The carriers would much rather have you lose your phone and have you go buy a new phone from them that you can immediately put your data back on and be right back in business, because then you're happy, then you keep your contract going and you keep them happy. If all this security stuff gets in the way and they've got to go through and decrypt things and you've got to bring multiple keys together to get back at your data, that complicates stuff, and most quote-unquote normal people don't know how to do that. So the solutions really aren't there for most of the general purpose devices to do that. And that's why if you want to encrypt that data, you really need to have your own encryption scheme above and beyond what the OS and what the carriers offer. So we'll talk about that.
Also just SSH into phones. The majority of people that jailbreak their iPhones, they don't know that the root password is what Alpine 21 or
Yep.
something like that, and they just leave the root password that way. SSH, turn on, running, not wise.
Yeah, so you can just SSH into the phone was a comment and be able to get access as root and get through anything you need. And you can do that on quite a few of the devices. Yeah, good point.
Well, the other thing I don't know if people are aware of, but the telephone security isn't that secure because they've already turned that over to the government.
Yeah, telephone security isn't that secure because they've turned that over to the government. Yeah, we've heard some hints of that. You probably saw RIM with the BlackBerry network as they went through India and China and Saudi Arabia, and rumors are that there are several other countries that the government had to have the keys to be able to decrypt that, so there wasn't sensitive data related to state-sponsored terrorism and who knows, maybe other things they're interested in, that were flowing across all of these networks that governments could not look at what was going in and out of the country. Wow. Yeah. It's a little bit of a privacy issue, but not every country has the same privacy concerns as we do. We've definitely got some good things and some things that are a bit challenging, but we also have the EFF fighting for us quite a bit as well, making sure that they're balancing out some of the privacy concerns. So if you haven't taken a look at what the Electronic Frontier Foundation is doing these days, go out and check it out, because there's a lot of privacy concerns that they're out there battling, fighting. You might not always agree with what they're doing, but at least you can understand what some of the issues are. They're a good organization to track because they definitely get in front of a lot of this. But yeah, there's governments that want to look at this, organizations that want to look at this. 3G networks in other countries are freely inspected. They see all of your texting, everything you're doing. So, if you're out there texting and thinking that you're sending something that's rather private and, nobody's going to know that you're buying another company or doing something that would be pretty substantial for somebody else to know, don't send it over SMS because that's pretty easy to read. In fact, there might even be some people in this room that have the equipment to do that. It's under $4,000 now to go through and set up your own little cell site and be able to peer and read stuff. So, not that I recommend that, but Daryl's going to get out the whip. And then, when you take a look at the threats as well, everybody automatically jumps to the threats against the technology and what's out there in the device. And it's really not about the technology. It's got to play in it. Usually these days, if you want to target somebody and you want to get some data, go after what?
The people.
The people, absolutely. They're the easiest ones to get. You can send somebody a document, just a simple PDF, and boom, you've owned their PC, you've owned their phone, you've owned their life, basically. You can send some information through Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, impersonating somebody and get others to believe it. Because of all of the rich data that's out there these days on these social networking sites, I mean, it's a fisher's dream. You can go through and really highly target an attack so that you're making it extremely believable. And it's even more believable if you're able to get and take control of somebody's email account. Because one of the worst attacks that I've seen in the last month has been a compromised Hotmail account where somebody sent out and said, hey, I'm traveling. I can't access phone right now. There's no way for you to call me. I'm in a really loud place. They took my phone. They took this, that. Still in my passports, but I need some money. And because it was coming from an actual email account, it's very believable. And I got one of these, and it was my brother's email account that got hacked. And immediately I'm thinking, oh no, my mom's totally going to buy this. And guess what? She did. She totally bought it. I called her, I emailed her, I said, don't do this. She was responding immediately. And I got on and I responded back to this guy, and I'm like, here, okay, so if you are my brother, what's your son's middle name? And, well, I don't have time for this. He was right there in real time. Here I am corresponding with the hacker, trying to figure out what's going on. Yeah, I reported it through to the authorities, but it's amazing the networks that they've got set up. I mean, these guys are prepared with call centers to be able to get in and get this information very, very quickly. And it is so believable when they can actually combine multiple factors together.
Should have sent him that PDF.
Yeah. I got to work on that. But that's one of the big problems. How do you fix this? Education. I was waiting for somebody to say that. Education, training. That fixes the whole thing, right? No. Don't give up on that. The education, the training, the awareness campaigns, definitely, turn people into skeptics whenever they receive something. Have them check multiple factors to make sure that, there is something really going on there. But you can't tell people, hey, anytime you get a PDF, don't click on it. Anytime you get a Word document, don't click on it. And none of us get our work done, right?
I heard someone actually saying maybe we should reverse it, and actually the security people start releasing what looks to be legitimate. When they open it, sirens go off and things, and they actually get embarrassed. So we turn the tables. Rather than getting actually compromised, they're getting embarrassed. But it's, I heard someone saying that sometime.
Yeah, I like that. Send out something and have them be embarrassed. We'll send them the pictures from Flickr of what they did the weekend before.
In a PDF.
Yeah, in a PDF. But, there's a lot of big companies that have been hit by this as well. You look at the RSA attack. I mean, supposedly that came in because somebody opened up a PDF document. We've got some big issues here. We've really got to fix this because there's some technology things we can do for this. There's education, but we've got to fix some of the security architectures we put in place. This just isn't working. All right. So in terms of concerns and things that we're looking at, here's just an example of some of the threats, mitigations, and risks, and some of the threat factors that people are talking about. A little bit of an eye chart. Sorry, I can send this to you later if you want to see it. But you've got people who are putting in keystroke loggers, either physical or software-based, and there's a lot of these out there today. Many of these vulnerabilities, one of the first things they do is get a keystroke logger in there, and try to be able to get people's domain credentials, get on the domain, be able to do some escalation, to get into figure out who the administrators are, get keystroke loggers on the administrator's system, and then it's basically game over because even the admins use their domain credentials for everything, right? So that's a real problem. How do we fix that? Well, some of the mitigations, antivirus, right? Great product, isn't it? Yeah. You still have to use it. Antivirus does catch some stuff, but it's very, very rare these days. I have not, in the last 2 years, had anything targeted against me that antivirus caught at all. Seriously. So that's pretty bad. But it's still called for by a whole bunch of regulations, and it does actually have some place within enterprises taking a look at emails and other things that are coming in and being filtered. And you absolutely need this on home computers as well. But its effectiveness has gone way down. So what can we do on top of antivirus? Well, we can do some software integrity management, things like tripwire, do some whitelisting, make sure that you're locking down the environment a little bit. How many people use that at home? Yeah, only a couple hands in this room even. It's really not an easy thing to do. Fortunately, the companies that produce a lot of the operating systems are getting on top of this, and they're going to be integrating these more and more as time goes on. But, when you look at any of us being able to get in and update something like servicehost.dll on our Windows machine, should we ever really be able to do that? Have you ever had a legitimate reason to replace that file outside of a Microsoft patch? I mean, why should we be able to? Apple's coming out with OS X Lion next week, supposedly, and there's going to be some further lockdowns associated with that. But one other thing that I always like to talk about is this philosophical debate. Which is more secure? All right, we'll take a poll. Which is more secure, this iPad 2 or that Windows 7 laptop? How many people say the iPad?
Depends on the user.
It depends on, no. We'll say it's same user, they know what they're doing. Which one's more secure?
Out of the box or after you?
Actually, I'm going to say the Windows 7.
You're going to stay with Windows 7, okay.
Well, I know that's been virused twice now in the last month, and the patch that they put out was broke 20 minutes after it was released. So, I mean, that's not secure.
Okay.
There's not even a heuristic checker on it to see if something's going on. At least Windows 7 has a heuristic antivirus, anti-malware going on, so you have a little bit of protection.
Okay, that's one viewpoint, and actually a pretty good one. Let's take all of these considerations in, that you've got somebody who knows what they're doing, they've applied all the patches and updates, they've appropriately protected the system. How many people say the Windows 7 machine is more secure? Okay, about 10. How many people say the iPad's more secure? Okay, about the same number. How many people could care less? That's a much bigger part of the room. Well, it's an interesting debate, though, isn't it? So you take a look back, and yes, Apple's very much been in the news these days, and I'm just picking on them because I happen to have one here. You could do the same thing with a lot of the other tablet environments. But yeah, there have been some problems, there have been some patches, some security issues. How many breach incidents have been associated with the iPad this year? How many breach incidents have been associated with Windows this year? Interesting. How many patches and updates have been there for Internet Explorer, for Adobe, for other technologies that are on that Windows 7 laptop? Yeah, it's not a clean decision, is it? And that's why I think we need to change the way we think about this. Let's not talk about what's more secure, because you know what? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. All you people who said, I don't care, I kind of agree with you. It's not about security. It's about protection. Which device is going to more appropriately protect your data and your interests? Which device is going to help you both get your work done and help you be protecting things at the appropriate level? That's what we should be talking about. I don't care which one of these you want to use. I really don't. You need to use the one that works best for you and works best for protecting company interests. So it's not about security. It's about protection. It's about risk. And you'll see a little bit more of that as we go along. But there are definitely some issues here. I mean, it's blatantly simple to pick up one of these devices, be able to hit the power button and the little button down here at the same time, and it does what? Captures the screen, does a screen print. You get a copy of everything on there. Now, you can do the same thing in Windows, right? Alt print screen, but you can disable that in group policy, right? But if you're kind of good, know what you're doing, and have admin rights, you can disable group policy, right? It's a cat and mouse game. Is that really what we should be worried about? Yeah. You don't want people copying sensitive corporate data. But I would argue, why is it here in the first place? I mean, it shouldn't be on this device. You should maybe, if you've got something that sensitive, just be displaying it on the device. And maybe you should redact out any of the really sensitive stuff before it even gets displayed on the device so that you're not losing this. I mean, if your biggest concern is you're outsourcing to somebody over in China or India or maybe someplace like Nebraska, and all of a sudden, you're worried about them seeing this really, really sensitive data, why are you doing this in the first place? If you've got to show them a screen that's got somebody's social security number on it and there's no way to take that out, find a way to take that out. Find a way to redact that so that they're not seeing that info.
Unfortunately, I think some of the biggest issues is dealing with data classification. So many organizations do not have any understanding of classifying their data, so they don't know what's considered sensitive and what's not sensitive. Most employees don't.
So, that gets to data classification. Daryl had brought up. Most people don't know what's sensitive and what's not sensitive. You sure? You might not know across the company, but
there's some things.
I bet I could ask you on a given week, what sensitive data do you work with, and where do you get that from? What application is that in? What SharePoint site is that on? Whatever. You could tell me that.
Some people, some employees do. I still run into a number of employees that are like, "You mean I can't send Social Security numbers out in email? That's classified data." And it sounds so lame and stupid, but it's horribly common in a lot of companies. Not all companies, but I've dealt with more than enough companies where it's this totally befuddled look when they find out that Social Security numbers shouldn't be sent in email.
Did everybody hear that in the back? Yeah. So what's the answer to that problem? Go through and do this big 10-year data classification project. When you're done with it, declare the results completely invalid and start over, right? And that's what companies have been trying to do. I would argue we need to do that a little different way. Don't try to boil the ocean. Do a little triage part of that. Go to every manager and say, look, you need to tell each one of your employees, everybody who works for you, here's the really sensitive stuff that you're working with every day. And I'm not talking about, you go to the company intranet site and it says company confidential on the bottom. No. Every employee sees that. That's like completely immaterial. I'm talking about the stuff that really matters. And that's part of the problem. We slap company confidential on everything. Everything. I can't even create a new PowerPoint without that appearing on the bottom, and I got to delete it on every single slide. It's become meaningless to most people. So you really have to go back to everybody and say, what are the major things that if this got out would end the business, would end your career, would be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, would tank the stock, would, whatever. What are those things? And that's what you care about. Do that from a triage perspective first. Others, how are you handling this?
What do you do about, he made a good point. In my history, I know that there's some small percentage of people who are anti-segregation of data, and no matter what you put in, they decided that because of their particular view, those delineations shouldn't be there. So you say, well, don't allow Social Security numbers to go out because the organization is liable. their view is all this information is free. They're put upon because you're telling them not to share that information, and whatever controls you put in, they actively pursue getting around them or ignoring them. What do you do about that?
What do we do?
Short of firing them or something.
Okay. What is anybody else facing that problem? First of all, is anybody else facing that problem? Guess what? I guarantee you are. If you're hiring any of the new generation, the young generation that's coming in and has been coming in doesn't think about privacy the way we do. They're Facebooking and tweeting and sending stuff that, oh my God, I'd be completely freaked out to let other people see if it happened to me. You know, it never does. But some of the things that I've seen posted are just like, wow, you actually put that out there, and you haven't thought, you know, maybe a few years from now, somebody might not find that funny, and you might not get a job because of that, or, you know, whatever. They don't care. They're not thinking about this. And we won't go into the whole parent, whatever. But there is a big difference.
They don't care about your information.
Exactly.
They're sloppy about theirs, and
Yep.
yours is don't take any steps to even protect that.
And they don't care about company information as well. Well, there are some ways to address that. And, you know, part of it's the education, training, awareness campaign. Part of it is we need to put some additional enforcement in so that we're not just handing them an employment agreement and say, here, do the right thing. We're actually helping them along and enforcing some of this in policy. I want to hear from some others. How are you handling this, Dave?
One of the issues that Daryl brought up is about the Social Security number. Within corporation, which I'm associated with, individuals share their information. So that Social Security number is unimportant to an HR person, where it is very important to a tax person. They share that, so no one wants to own that. Consequently, one person may freely share it via email, and the other one might view it as a travesty to do so. So then what typically defaults in this organization that I'm associated with, they say, let IT handle it. IT can control that data. I don't have to accept that as my responsibility to keep it from getting to IT in the first place. And this is pandemic across the corporation.
And how's that working for you?
Really, really well.
Well, one of the things we used to do when I was with Dave back at the old parent company for data classification, we had in IT or in Information Services Security Department, we had put together a data classification policy. Obviously, if data has certain levels of classification, it should be handled a certain way, and there should be some physical aspect to that. Should it be encrypted in transit, encrypted in storage, those type of concepts. So what we did is we were the ultimate gatekeepers. That means if anyone said, hey, we need to set up an EDI transaction through the firewall, they had to make changes to the firewall. It had to be approved by security. So to educate the community out there, every time a request came in that involved information transfer in and out of the company, we would actually send the data classification to the person making a request and say, classify your data. It took us about 18 months, but after about 18 months, we no longer had to request anyone to classify data. They would contact us and go, we need to do communication with bank such and such, and we're going to be using this type of data that falls in this classification. So they instantly, after about 18 months, everyone started realizing what the classification was.
And how many classification levels did you have?
It was the typical 4 or 5 type thing, you know, that everything from public information all the way up to corporate, what we consider secret, which would be things like divestitures and acquisitions, things like that would be, or client attorney type stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. A lot of stuff, though, with the younger generation, you really, and people in general who have some issues with privacy, you can make it much simpler and just have it be a green, yellow, red. Green, it's public. You can do whatever you want with this. Copy it down to your mobile device, send it out, post it up on a website. Really doesn't matter. Yellow, there's some stuff we care about. You really shouldn't be sending this out without an NDA, but we all know how great NDAs are. Yeah, it totally prevents people from sharing stuff. Really. But it's something that should be treated rather sensitively. Red is something that is extremely material. It's very sensitive. It should be compartmentalized. This isn't something that you just send out to the printer and leave it there. This is something that's printed in a locked room kind of stuff, and help people to understand that. The gentleman's point about people not caring about privacy, I've walked through offices where I've seen people print out their benefits information that includes their salary and everything on it. They print out their bonus information. It's laying in the printer room. They print out stuff associated with code that they're working on. They send something up to developer forums so that they get input on, hey, I've been having trouble with this. It keeps getting flagged as cross-site scripting. Here's the 50 lines of code that we think this is in. Can you take a look at this and help me find and fix this problem? Meanwhile, they're disclosing sensitive company intellectual property by doing that. But they think they're helping the company. See, that's the problem. They're not trying to be malicious. They're just clueless. And that's the tough part. But instead of going through this massive data classification project and standing over everybody and watching everything they do, adopt the green, yellow, red model and help people to understand, here's the stuff that's totally public, here's the kind of things that fall within this yellow bucket, and red stuff, hey, until you can prove yourself worthy, we're not even going to show you any of that, so don't worry about it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Anybody doing anything different or anything like that that's been working for you? I think the gentleman in the back had a comment before. No? Saw somebody raise their hand back there.
I just wanted, you use the word security and protection, and that was a little fuzzy to me, like how you differentiate between the two.
Differentiating between security and protection. Well, when I say security, or when anybody else thinks security, what do you automatically think?
Well, I can say protection.
Well, that's because you're in this room. What do most of the people that you know of think? What does your family think? What do your friends think? Your neighbors, people who you work with? You say security, what are they immediately going towards?
Physical restriction.
Yeah, they've got a solution for that right away. Whether it's antivirus, whether it's a password, whether it's a token, whether it's something, they're automatically jumping to a conclusion. They've got this one. This is why we've got this over-reliance on antivirus and SSL and other things that are great technologies, but we shouldn't be counting on them as much as we should. We should be stepping back and saying, hey, what do I really need there to protect this data, instead of what security measures can I possibly throw on this right away to check the box and say that I've done it. And yeah, thanks for asking for the clarification. That's what I mean by that. I mean, security oftentimes is something that people have preconceived notions over. And I find that by talking about security, especially with executives, they tune out because they've heard that so many times. When you talk about how can we protect the things that really matter, they kind of perk up a little bit because there's been a lot of that in the news lately. Does that make sense? Getting closer? Yeah. It's very subtle. You're right. It's extremely subtle, but I also have found it to be very important and definitely helping. Okay. Talked a little bit about people-based computing, and I'll kind of fly through this, but no pun intended, you'll see in a second. How many people have heard these requests? Yeah. As you move from a corporate managed laptop and a complete corporate managed end-to-end ownership model into people-centric computing, which they're doing it already, these are their requirements. Your IT model handles this, right? The architecture and network that you designed back in the 80s takes care of all of this, right? Yeah, not. As you can see, these are things that really challenge our traditional concepts of information technology and security. Compound that with the fact that we've got multiple classes of devices. We got into the little argument before about which is more secure. This is a consumer-grade device. Make no mistakes about it. This is not an enterprise-grade device. This is not a mission-grade device. This is a consumer-class device only. Now, a lot of people are using this within enterprises, and I'm not saying it's bad. This can actually be kind of a cool thing to use. But don't expect it to have all of the be-all, end-all security measures that you're going to have on another class of device. Don't expect it to be able to install certificates and PKI systems and managed encryption and all kinds of other stuff that you can do. It's just not going to do that. Doesn't make it bad, but it means we've got to treat it differently, and we've got to compensate for that, which you'll see in a little bit. We have the typical enterprise class device, and then we also have some mission-grade devices, some things that can help to give us assurances that we haven't had before. And you look at some of the advances in Intel vPro technologies, and you take a look at what's being done with Type 1 hypervisors, Zen Client being an example of that. We now have the ability to take a system and completely through boot make sure that the firmware has not been tampered with, the BIOS has not been tampered with, it's digitally signed. It can be attested and attributed back to the manufacturer for a complete state of where that BIOS was. The hypervisor can be attested to through TXT, Intel Trusted Boot. And so as you bring up this mission class device, you know that nothing has changed since the last time it booted. You can check the OS load, the workload that's running on top of that. Let's say it's Windows 7 or Linux. You can make sure that that hasn't changed since the last time. And as the OS starts, it can look down and verify that the hypervisor hasn't been modified and that the hardware hasn't been modified. So we've got a model that includes measurements, it includes attestation, it includes attribution, and it helps us lead to an environment of assurance that we have not had in enterprise or PC class devices before. If you're interested, I can send you a little video on how the Defense Intelligence Systems Agency, DISA, is doing this. Mike Mestrovich has gone through and talked about this, and he's got a little 20-minute video on all the challenges that they faced. And yeah, they've got the same consumerization challenges and people bringing in their own devices that all the rest of us have. But they've also got some really ultra-secret, people live and die by this information needs. And they've moved to a mission-grade platform that's helping them address that. And if you're interested, I can send you some info on that you might want to take a look at just so you understand the state of extremely high protection today. I almost said security. You almost got me there. Now, not one model is right for everybody. If I had to work on one of these mission-grade systems every day, I'd be about 30% as effective as I am right now because of all of the gates that I would have to go through to get my job done and share data and do things. If I can work on this most of the time, I'm very close to 99% effective, but there may be some challenges with data protection. So what should I do? Should I be locked into one device, or should I be able to choose the device that I need based on where I am, what I'm doing, what my protection needs are? And that's really what this is all about. On the y-axis, you're going to see the relative risk to the enterprise. So, what's the risk? Is it high, medium, low? And it's relative. This can change depending on a whole bunch of parameters, as people brought up earlier. On the x-axis, you've got the relative TCO. And notice I didn't say acquisition cost. I said TCO. Total cost of ownership is extremely important here. Anybody who's just looking at what the device costs, you're really missing the boat. And then the user experience index is also in here as well. Are users happy? Is this something they want to use? Does this help them get their job done? Or are they maybe slowed down a little bit, somewhat degraded, but they understand it because they know they're working with sensitive data and they got to jump through a couple more hoops? Or are they really pissed off because they just can't get anything done? You've put so many roadblocks in their way, it's like, throw this out, I'm going to go buy my own stuff because I'm not dealing with you anymore. We got to keep that in mind. That's very important. Up in the upper left is the unmanaged home PC. You would be amazed at the number of companies that are trying to say, we're going to close some facilities or allow people to work from home, or that new call center we're bringing up, we're not going to go buy or rent that. We're just going to let people work from home. And, oh, by the way, because of virtualization and desktop virtualization and VDI and stuff like that, we can let people work from home. It works really cool. But we want them to use that same PC that they already have, and because of virtualization, that's going to be 100% secure, right? No. But there are people that are trying to do this. And I bring this up because you need to know this, and you need to help set the record straight. You cannot grab a 7-year-old system that maybe has not been patched ever They never turned on Windows Update. They've never really done any maintenance on it, probably aren't running antivirus, and have somebody use that securely. It's just not going to happen. And by the way, one other point, don't let anybody talk you into try to manage unmanaged systems. That's a losing battle. You're going to spend a lot of time, a lot of money. It's going to be a lot of support nightmares. And ultimately, you're going to lose. You're not going to wind up gaining what you sought out to in the first place. Don't try to manage unmanaged systems. What you can do with that home PC, though, is a couple of things. First of all, you can have them boot from media. There's a whole bunch of distros that you can download that somebody can boot up a CD or DVD, be able to get into their online environment, get into a browser, whatever you really need them to get to. And any viruses or whatnot that would have been on the hard drive aren't going to affect them. Can also have them boot from stick, and there's even sticks that are full AES 256 encrypted, FIPS 140, some of the top security technologies out there for providing protection and offline management and whatnot. So you can do stuff like that. Your users like that, though? No, if they're going to work from home from their home PC, what do they want to do? They want to be able to check personal email. They want to be able to tweet back and forth. And they want to be on the company stuff at the same time. So if we solve their problem by booting from stick, maybe not. But if you're a company that says, hey, look, no, when you're working for me, I don't want you switching back and forth. I want you to just boot into this environment. You can control that. And the boot from stick is actually kind of nice if you need people to carry their profile around with them and some data, because it can be encrypted, you can manage it. It's kind of a cool technology if you haven't looked at it. One other thing you can do there, though, is you can give them a thin or a zero client and one of these cables that you just hit scroll lock a couple times and go back and forth from one computer to the other. So they can be on their home PC, click, click. They can be on the work PC. And because the work PC is a thin or zero client, absolutely no management. You don't have to go through and patch it all the time. You don't have to worry about viruses. If something screws up, they turn it off, they turn it back on, it's right back where it started. Now, how many of these banks, insurance companies, and others that want people to work from home go, yeah, that sounds like that makes sense. That'd be the lowest, support that we could imagine. How many of you think do that? All of them. Yeah. Nice. How many of them instead do you think jump to, oh my God, that'd cost a couple $100. I couldn't possibly ever do that, right? So they'll spend $5,000 to save $200. Wow. Per device, per user. But that's the old thinking, and that's a lot of what's been out there. We got to help people understand there are options. It's not a one-size-fits-all world anymore. Some of these might work for you, some of these might not. The point is, you've got choices. And there's a lot of cool stuff you can do. Any other questions or comments around that? No?
We were talking about the mission versus the public consumer. How do you find a classification for a device?
So the classification for device is really based on capabilities and based on vendor support and based on what's available for it. So like this iPad, it's pretty obvious. Steve Jobs says, this is user, this is consumer. You can't run antivirus on this. Steve Jobs is not going to approve an antivirus program for the iPad. But arguably, it really doesn't need it. Steve Jobs also is not going to approve a program that introduces a virus or is a keystroke logger or a screen scraper. So it's not going to get on there in the first place. Maybe. But that's the thing. So what can you do? You can install things like mobile device management software that says, hey, when you're at work, when you're connecting up to your work environment, here's what I'll let happen and here's what I won't let happen. I'm not going to try to wipe your device. I'm not going to do all this other stuff. But what I can do is say when you're at work, screen capture is disabled when you're in my applications. The ability for you to turn on the voice recorder is disabled while you're in my applications. Here's the whitelist of other apps that I will let you switch to while you're online with my company. And anything that's not on this list, sorry, you're not going to use. When you disconnect from the company, everything just magically goes back to where it was. Because what you're doing is controlling the session. You're not trying to control the device. And that's a big, big difference. And so you can look for those types of solutions. What did that just let you do? That let you use this device with sensitive company data and have some control over it without trying to manage an unmanaged device. So I know what you're going to ask next. What about email? Email's the big issue, right? What if you set up your email system so that any public email can come down to the device? Any public data can be copied off of the web or anything else and go down here so you can read offline on a plane, do all kinds of other fun things, and only public email shows up. If you've got something that's confidential, that either somebody like Daryl went through and said this is top secret confidential, he's probably the only one in the room that would do that though. Or more likely, you pulled it out of a sensitive application, or DLP flagged it as being something that was interesting. What if any of that sensitive or confidential data never came down to the device? You got a little header that says, you've got something sensitive, click here, here's a little tiny URL that was generated, and you go to an online experience, you connect up to that. You go to Outlook that's running in the data center. It's got encryption, it's got your keys, it's got your digital signatures, certs, everything else. All that's protected in the data center never hits here. You can view that information, and then when you're done, you go back to what you were doing before. And in that way, sensitive data never hits the device in the first place, but you can still use it. Make sense? By the way, you can do that in many email systems today. It's a simple configuration.
The user interface between the person and the authentication can still be owned. Key logging, for example.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I could get something in the DOM browser and be able to, do screen scraping and be able to take over your user input. There are some rudimentary checks that you can do on some of the consumer devices to make sure that you haven't had DOM poisoning, or you can check for antivirus, you can check for a certain patch level. You don't just blindly let people into your enterprise applications. You can have some checks and balances. But then also, if you can't verify it, maybe you don't let them into Oracle Financials. Maybe it's your top auditor or your CFO, and they're trying to get in from here, and you can't verify whether they're jailbroken or not. Tell them, sorry, you can't get in on here. Go get in on something where you can. And looking at some of the enterprise class devices, I think we all understand how those work. The mission grade devices, I can give you some data on there and really show you what DISA is doing. It'll help you understand that solution a lot better. So we've talked about a lot of this in terms of what we can do from a control perspective, and I'll just give you the real quick summary. First of all, don't try to control everything. Manage what you really care about. Go for the truly sensitive data. Do this triage data classification and go after the stuff that you care about. Don't try to manage the devices, manage the sessions. Don't sit there and spin about all the things that you can't do. Worry about the things that you can do. Add some value. People understand when they're trying to get in and you say, hey, look, because of the sensitivity of this data, because of we don't want to get you in trouble and have a breach reporting event, we're not going to let you do that from this device. Here's all the other devices you can, but it's not one size fits all anymore. Part of that as well, we've got to bring your own computer program at Citrix. When people bring in their own systems, we don't let them run on the corporate network. We treat them as outsiders. They have to go in through a VPN, or they have to go in through app and desktop virtualization. We do some checks and balances before we let them in. We don't let them have access to everything. We let them have access to things that are appropriate to the risk based on the device they're bringing in and what control measures are on there. And one other thing that's coming up, instead of access just being your domain credentials and your two-factor token, we're seeing authentication now being what I call the 5 W's. It's who, what, why, where, and when. We used to know who, right? You'd have some identity factors, you'd know that somebody had a token, but we really didn't know the rest of this very well. Now, we can understand why they're trying to get in, what class of device, what type of data they're accessing, where they're coming in from. Is this a normal pattern of usage for this user? Or are they trying to request something that's out of the ordinary and apply for an exception? And all of this can be automated through workflows so that instead of just a you're either an outsider or you've got the all-access pass and can go anywhere in the network, you've got some granularity based on the situation. And that's some really cool stuff. That's what's going to let us bring in these devices. I think we've talked through all of this already, so I'm not going to spend any time on this slide. In closing, I'll say a couple things. For the stuff you really care about, whether it's local, whether it's remote, keep it in the vault, make sure that it's managed. And for the rest of the stuff, hey, let freedom reign. So, thank you very much, everybody.